up in a predominantly white area. Wait, hold on. When I say white, I mean really white, you guys. I grew up in New Hampshire. Think La Jolla times 1,000 with a lot less money, but a lot more maple syrup and lobster. Yes, I grew up in such a predominantly white area that I am considered quite ethnic. Which is kind of funny to me now, but wasn't funny to me always. I was one of the few Muslim kids at my school, and definitely the only Iranian. In the beginning of my life, I met my difference with pure denial. I wanted to be just like my classmates, and starting off with a name like Jahleh certainly didn't help. What could I do? I took the next logical 6-year-old step. I came home from the first grade indignant with my father. I'm not calling you Baba anymore. No one knows what I'm talking about. I'm calling you Daddy. My father, a serious man with a bit of a temper, didn't take this well. My mother, always the peacemaker, saw that if my father's skin wasn't so brown, it might have turned red. It's just a phase, she reassured him. She'll do that for like a week tops and then grow tired of it. Just watch. And she was right. Both my father and I cringed when the word daddy left my lips. It was impossible to me. It was impossible to make the transition, thankfully. I'm not even sure it held out for the week shelf life my mother put on it. So denial was effectively put on the back burner for a few years as confusion came cropping up. I was jumping rope with a new girl in my apartment complex, waiting for the morning school bus. Suddenly, the girl Heather was snatched up by her grandmother, mid-Cinderella dressed in yellow. It was sudden, it was swift, and I wouldn't understand what was going on until my mother explained it to me after I got home. While Heather and I were playing, my mother was speaking to her grandmother, the way many parents do at the bus stop, getting along just fine, when both women saw my father drive by in the family station wagon, leaving for work. Look, there's no denying my father's Middle Easternness. The mustache alone is incriminating. Okay, that's not really my father. There he is. When Heather's grandmother sneered and then huffed out, "I don't trust those people," my mother replied, "Well, maybe we can change that. Would you like to meet him? That's my husband." I imagine Heather's grandmother's face recoiled like a salted slug at that point. Or maybe her teeth clenched together so hard they halved her face. I can only speculate on what her reaction might have been, since that was literally the last time they ever spoke to me. Somehow stealthily avoiding our scary family, even within the tiny parameters of the apartment complex. That childhood memory emblazoned in my mind would begin the nascent stages of my defiance. I became very proud to assert my differences. I felt it gave me an edge. It made me more me than anything. I wore it like a badge of honor. I even showed up to middle school once for some sort of project on personal heritage in full Kurdish garb. I want you guys to fully appreciate this sentiment. Let me show you. I wore this to middle school. Traditional Kurdish women's clothing involves a lot of loud colors, sequins, and is pretty much the opposite of what would be considered cool for a prepubescent girl of the late 90s. But it didn't quite account for adolescent cruelty as I boldly strolled the hallways of James Mastercola, and I surely wasn't prepared to spend third period in the bathroom seeking refuge from a laughing, taunting group of 8th grade boys. Despite the incident, I continued to want to educate, want to share, want to be proud. But after 9/11, things got way more complicated. I was a sophomore in high school, and all at once, I became a weird, unprepared spokesperson. to answer for the deeds of people like me on one end of the spectrum, and to share my unique and cultured perspective on the other side. A once sort of background character in my high school's narrative, my opinion was suddenly heavily sought after, and this interrogation lasted well into college. What does Islam say about killing other people? Do you guys really behead people from other religions? How is your experience different from every other American's after 9/11? Why do they hate our freedom? Sometimes I met these questions with hostility. Angrily, I'd defend my religion that I only sort of haphazardly practiced. Sometimes I met the questions with a sense of serious contemplation. What sage advice do I have to offer? But all the time, I answered. I never thought to say, I can only speak from my perspective, or how the fuck should I know? I'm a terrible Muslim. Or more importantly, why do I have to answer this? Regardless, I did answer every question dutifully and with the weight of all Muslims on my back. I don't know exactly what the current day statistics are, but that's roughly 1.6 billion, you guys. But every person, every story has a breaking point. The point when the main character has a grand epiphany, but mine actually came with an accompanying breakdown. I was a sophomore in college and had already had so many of these experiences that it became routine, mundane. I had stock responses prepared for every inevitable interaction, bigoted or well-intentioned. That's why when a professor asked me to create a presentation on feminist readings of the Quran for the annual Academic Excellence Conference, I happily obliged, even though I had to do all this new research and writing out of no previously established classwork, which was unusual. And also happily obliged when, after that presentation, I was asked to do small mini-lectures in various classes and events for the freshman reading program's book of choice, Persepolis. A graphic novel about the author growing up in Iran during the time of the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Even though I knew a lot about the topic from one of my father's many exhaustive personal mini-lectures, do not even mention Reagan in front of that man, I still had to do a lot of research and craft a presentation that gave historical and religious context to a group of people who probably were hearing about all of this for the first time. Let's be honest, they were probably hearing it pronounced Iran for the first time. Everything went well, and professors and students alike praised the informative sessions. Until it came time to conduct one where I worked, at the Writing Center, for my colleagues. I thought this was going to be the easiest gig. I was so adept at rolling out the info at this point that I could do it in my sleep. I was right in the midst of my railing against the coup of 1952 by the American and British governments to overthrow the democratically elected Mossadegh in favor of the Shah when fellow tutor Phil cut in. So what? I hate being interrupted. Excuse me? So what? What does this really have to do with the themes of the book? It's more than just the history of Iran, Jahleh. It's about adolescence, authorial defiance, and the universality of those themes. Why are you even talking about this right now? Well, I began and scanned all of the critical faces of my Writing Center peers. I opened my mouth, poised for a response. I wanted to say to Phil that you can't possibly venture into this book without the right background into world politics of the time that threaten the democracy of the region, that understanding Islam in the first place is necessary to consider the tremendous move to theocracy building in the region, that only a very white person would want to try to pit universality over the complicated story structure entrenched in so much of what I was talking about. But I didn't even finish my sentence. I just started bawling uncontrollably It wasn't even a dignified cry, a light public sniffling. It was messy, it was gushing, it was horrible. I am, when it comes down to it, one hell of an ugly crier. Why am I even talking about this? I don't know why I'm talking about this. You all asked this of me. What do you want? What do you want from me? Though it was hard to tell through the haze of my waterworks, I sensed that all the people that I had to work with day in and day out were very confused. They looked around at each other nervously, but I couldn't stop, and I didn't care. Phil, although an incredibly inconsiderate asshole, had triggered in me a feeling that was there all along. This wasn't just an outburst in a frustrated moment. This was 19 years of geyser-like pressure exploding. It was being followed into the bathroom by the 8th grade boys. It was being interrupted in a childhood game just because I was different. It was being asked a million questions and being tagged an unwilling ambassador. And the geyser hasn't stopped since.
Her first time on the VAMP stage, Jahleh Ghanbari.